While watching me make Pokemon minis, has the thought passed your mind, "That looks fun, I want to make one"? I sure hope so, because I'm selling ones you can buy and bake at home. Shrinky Dinks are a really fun craft, and especially easy since with a buy and bake purchase, I'll be sending you along the pieces already printed and cut. Included will be a Gremlin Attic coin that is there so that you can test your oven before potentially torching your new minis by accident. But before we get to baking, let's talk about what is not included. To create these miniatures, you'll need tweezers for the inevitably tiny pieces, and rubber band is nice to keep the tweezers closed while inking the edges. I use super glue to paste them together. I like the gel kind the best, but aside from that, I found no difference between brands. To finish, I recommend a gloss varnish like Mod Podge. Make sure it's gloss, as these minis look substantially worse with any other finish. You'll need a cheap brush for varnish application, and a brush-style pen for lining your minis. Finally, you'll need a baking sheet and baking paper. It doesn't need to be new, but preferably you shouldn't continue to bake food on the one you use. Shrink plastic isn't supposed to be dangerous, but I like to keep my craft and food supplies separate. A few minis like Mega Dragonite and Superior will also need some kind of snips to remove the dashed support bars. I recommend model snips, but nail clippers will work in a pinch. I've experimented with a bunch of different styles to line minis, and finally found an easy method that not only can anyone do, but also it has the best results. A brush-style pen works amazingly well to not only quickly cover the edges, but it can get into the teeny tiny corners. Sharpies work fine on most of the surfaces, but simply cannot get everywhere. Use the broad side of the pen for most of the edges, and just gently pull the tip of the pen into the tricky little corners. You'll be able to cover the whole thing quite successfully. Now yours doesn't have to be this fancy. I just had one on hand, so I might as well use it. But linked below in my Amazon list are equivalent markers that work, as well as the rest of the supplies. And if you order via that link, I get a little kickback, and I really need every cent I can to keep this channel afloat. Line your baking sheet with a sheet of baking paper folded in half. Dollar store stuff works just fine. We need one side to make sure that the pieces don't stick to the tray, and the second is to encourage the pieces not to curl. The seam is the best place to put thin pieces, as they want to curl the most, so it's wise to plan for that. But before you start placing your pieces, let's get that coin out. The temperature and time needed to shrink them properly does vary from oven to oven, and I'd rather you do a test to find out if your oven charcoals plastic before sending the pieces through. And set the oven between 300 and 350 Fahrenheit. That's 150 to 177 Celsius. It'll be baked between 2 and 3 minutes. I found my own oven works best at the max temp and time, but it is kinda old. Don't forget to use an oven mitt. The tray will be hot. And just squish it with a book. It'll cool in a few minutes, and you can check your coin. Shrink plastic is not a precise material. You may find that your coin comes out a bit oblong. That's just something the material does. With a finished coin, you can now get your miniatures ready. You can use the same tray and the same paper. Like I said before, plan to put thin pieces up against the fold in the paper. They don't need a ton of room between each other, but you don't want any pieces overlapping or they'll stick together and throw off both shrinking. Then in a few minutes, you should have a set ready to assemble. Each of the minis will have all or most of its pieces numbered. Occasionally I won't number something small like War Turtle's tail because I couldn't find a good blank spot for it and figured you can just place it however you like. But for the numbered pieces, each number is glued to one another. Superglue generally sets rather fast, so if you're nervous, you can use white glue to allow yourself more futzing time, but you'll have to wait until the piece is totally dry before moving on to the next. Don't forget to utilize your tweezers and check it against the table to make sure that it's standing straight. If the pieces are in place but feel like they could have been glued tighter, don't fret. The varnishing step will set everything together firmly. Once it's glued together, go ahead and put a good dollop of glue on the surfaces that will be, generally its feet, on the base. The seam between the base and the mini is the most fragile, so it doesn't hurt to give it a bit more glue than the rest. You'll still be varnishing it like the rest, but it doesn't hurt to reinforce the weaker seams. Like lining, you don't have to do this step, but you're missing a lot if you do. Not only does it make the miniature more durable, but it makes the colors more vibrant too. Find a good cheap brush and brush varnish across the mini. You want the layers to cover but be thin. If it's showing up pure white, then you have too much varnish. You can blot it up with the brush and move it around. If it's white along the edges, that's okay. You just don't want it to be heavy on surfaces. Also be aware that some inks like to blot more than others. I found blue almost always bleeds into my varnish. However, wiping it off the brush between areas, keeping the layers thin, and letting the first layer fully dry before going to the second layer keeps it from being a problem. Of course, I'd recommend those steps with any mini. I guess just don't freak out if you see varnish turning a smidge blue. It just does that. Once it's dry, congratulations! You've made some really cool minis with your own skill. I love that for you, and I really hope you had fun. I love making these guys and very much believe it's a craft worth making accessible to other people. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know how your build went. I'm always improving my process. If you'd like to support me in this channel, there are links below to my Amazon purchases list, Etsy for available model kits, and Twitch where I stream on Sundays. A like and a comment helps a ton too, and don't forget to subscribe for future videos. As always, take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time. Bye!